Clinical Consultation Network. We do this every Tuesday at 12:30, as you know. And so we're very glad to have you today. I've got some great guests with us. We have Dr. Jana Dreyzehner and Celine Turco here with Life Connect Health. And they're going to talk to us about all the things Life Connect Health is doing to connect people with mental health care. And so I'm very anxious to get into their presentation. But of course, as you know, we start now with each section with our Get Smarticle. And so I'm going to do a little bit of a quick overview of an article that I read this last week on peer support. So today's Get Smarticle is Davidson et al. Peer support among persons with severe mental illnesses, a review of evidence and experience. So this is an article, 2012 article by that group. And this is basically a literature review. So a few of the things I talked about in here. So some of the things that peer staff are able to do that probably other types of staff who are working with people can't really do or do to the same degree. So one of those things that they can do is use positive self-disclosure. So this is telling personal stories about overcoming obstacles. I think it's important in this to stick to things that are more positive types of stories versus glorifying or, you know, talking about your failures over the course of time. But this is where you're really able to help people, is if you're able to show them some positive stories from your life that have been able to help them, or from the peer support person's life. Role modeling, demonstrating ways to deal with mental health concerns, and then conditional regard. I was a little bit confused by this term, and maybe as we get into your presentation a little bit, we can clarify this a little bit, but conditional regard, as it was described here, is reading and empathizing with the person. As I was reading about it, I was getting a little bit confused because now the name's slipping me. Carl Rogers. I had a form of psychotherapy in which he talked about unconditional positive regard, but this is a little bit of a different term here. So the conditional regard is reading and empathizing with the person that you're supporting. And so some of the outcomes that they were able to find from peer support, including increasing the person's sense of hope, control, and ability to affect changes in their lives, to increase their self-care, increase their sense of community belonging, and increase satisfaction with other life domains. So this is really important stuff. And then decreasing depression and psychosis as a result. So it has to, you know, we certainly would think from a mental health perspective, this is a very good service to be able to offer. But there's some skepticism out there among some practitioners and whether or not we're going to, you know, engage in using peer support. And so that, you know, some of these questions kind of get in the way of implementation from time to time. One of those questions, are peer staff too fragile to handle the stress of the demands of the job? Can they handle the administrative demands? Won't peer staff cause harm to clients by breaking confidentiality, saying the wrong things? Won't peer staff make my job harder rather than easier? And of course, the purveyors of this article are very supportive of peer support, and they are able to answer these and say, yeah, in their experience, people are able to handle the stress. They have to be given supervision just like anyone else, but they are able to handle the administrative demands with appropriate supervision. They generally find that with the appropriate training that people don't break confidentiality, that they're able to steer in the direction of staying within their bounds, and that it actually does make your job easier because it makes it more effective, whatever service you're providing. So a few things that they mentioned here that you should include in developing peer support is make sure you have a clear job description, role clarification, involve non-peer staff and organizational leaders in the development process, identify and value the contributions of peers. This is really important stuff because you could get somebody with peer support involved with your folks, but then if you start just kind of making them do things that nobody else wants to do, that's not a very, very good use of the peer support. You really have to value those unique contributions that they bring to the table. Start with at least 2 peer support staff so that the 2 peer support people can support one another is one of the things mentioned here. Identify a leader as a peer support champion. Provide training. So example of this would be how to share your story. If you're doing peer support for someone, tell them, basically what is the right way for me to be able to share this story. I was mentioning this a while ago because I know a lot of people, as they get into this, they may share some of those intimate details that have a pretty negative outcome for them sometimes. And those are not always the greatest stories to share. I mean, you might share that on the way, but also sharing how you were able to overcome in those circumstances. Supervision and expectations is the same as other employees. You also need to train the non-peer staff on how to intersect with the peer support folks, and then disseminating your success stories. And maybe you're going to even share some of that today with us, I hope. So there's our Get Smarticle for today. One other thing I'm going to point out just before I close is that the state has, and the person that you guys have hired in your in Life Connect Health is a peer support specialist, a certified peer support specialist. Did I say that correctly? Let me pull the other.
Yes.
And so they're certified through the state to provide that service. And am I sharing my screen still? This?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. So this is the guidebook, the handbook of guidelines, standards, and procedures for peer recovery specialists within the state of Tennessee. And so if you're interested in finding out more about that, I will share the article and we'll share this link to this handbook, because I think it is a service that we'd like to see done more with people with IDD, and that could actually be quite effective. And I know you guys are using it. You're going to talk about that among many other things today. So as we get into the meat of this, we've got Dr. Jana Dreyzehner and Celine Turco here with us. Can you guys take a moment and introduce yourselves?
Okay, I will start. I'm Jana Dreyzehner, and I'm a child psychiatrist, and I've been in the state of Tennessee working with the population of persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities and challenging behaviors for over 10 years now. And had the pleasure of meeting Celine and along that journey, and that's how we started Life Connect. So I will let Celine, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Celine Turco. I've worked with multiple populations, including at-risk youth in California, transitional youth with IDD, as well as sexual disordered adults in New Jersey for about 10 years. Worked in the co-occurring world in Pennsylvania before we expanded to Tennessee, and I met Dr. Dreyzehner and a lot of folks here at the IDD, the MCOs, TennCare, when the SOS program was being conceptualized. So met Dr. Dreyzehner in the process, and here we are.
Well, I'm glad you guys found your way to Tennessee too. And so let me lay out, I know Trey must have forewarned you that I asked you for an interesting fact at the beginning of this. And actually, I think both of you this is not your first time, so you should be prepared with that. So Dr. Dreyzehner, do you have an interesting fact you're prepared to share with us?
Okay, well, and I'm running out of interesting facts because I've been doing this, but I don't think I've used that. I have taxied in an F-15 Eagle.
Say that again. You've done what?
I've taxied in an Air Force fighter plane, an F-15
You,
Eagle.
you drove it yourself.
I taxied in it, which means I rode in it in the back seat
You
of a
rode.
two-seater.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were taxiing out to the runway and then turning it over to the pilot, but you rode in the. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
So, under what circumstance did you get to do that?
That's when my husband was the flight surgeon for um, the F-15 fighter squadron.
Oh, okay,
It's
okay.
a Marine
Well,
game.
cool. That is a good, interesting fact. Okay, thank you for that. And Celine, how about you?
Well, Dr. Dreyzehner and I have one more thing in common is as children, we wanted to be ballerinas. So I actually got to spend some time in Russia and I speak Russian, studied for 9 years and hope to one day be a ballerina, which turned out I wasn't good enough. So, but it was an interesting experience.
So you speak Russian as well.
Yes.
Wow. So that, and we already verified earlier you speak French. Those are interesting facts in and of themselves. But you also met Mikhail Baryshnikov in this trip to Russia, perhaps.
I wish.
Well, those are interesting facts. I appreciate y'all sharing those with us today. And so, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Who's going to do the presentation here?
Dr. Dreyzehner.
Get Michelle to pull it up for us. That would be great.
Looks like it's up there.
Okay.
Ready to launch.
Let's see. Can we go to the version that doesn't show the next one, or is that?
So I've swapped it twice, but I know WebEx has been having an issue with this as well and not swapping properly. Let me
All right.
try doing this a different way. Hold on.
Michelle, go to your settings.
No, I'm just going to
So
share
really
my
love that. That is
screen,
the best ever.
which will work better. How about that?
There we go. Okay. All right. Well, and so I'll just let you know when it's time to switch, but and you can go ahead to the next one now.
That's
And
that's the extent of my technical advice, though. Go to your settings. That's all I can
I
really.
like it. We'll keep that in mind. Um, So I want to say thank you again for the opportunity to introduce you to the Life Connect Health and the Life Connect Power Prep. And these are a few visuals here on the screen now of the Life Connect team in action. And as we mentioned, well, Celine and I founded the Life Connect Health in August of 2018 when we had the opportunity to work together developing the crisis stabilization and prevention services for persons with IDD and challenging behaviors in Tennessee. And through that experience, we saw the need for specialized behavioral health services for this population, um, especially incorporating DBT-informed interventions, which are a large part of our multi-layered, multidisciplinary Life Connect Power Prep model. And our goals, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Our goals are really in creating this, we're identifying and creating or making accessible the specialized behavioral health services needed for each individual. And so it is a very person-centered individual service. And we realized that a lot of these folks live throughout Tennessee, statewide, in rural areas, and didn't have the accessibility that was needed for services that were out there. And so we wanted to include and base this on telehealth to be able to be accessible to everyone. We wanted to be able to serve everyone, regardless, regardless of where they were or their ability to travel, which we know is really difficult for this population. And then also making the evidence-based assessment tools and treatment modalities accessible in this platform. And simply put, being helpful to the existing circle of supports to improve the lives of each individual that we served and their supports, both paid supports and natural supports. Next slide. Our team includes psychiatrists, skill system therapists, peer specialists, technology specialists, and American Sign Language users. We provide Life Connect Power Prep services statewide in Tennessee via telehealth technology. And our model emphasizes partnerships with existing providers and primary caretakers. We understand it's really key to creating that environment of support that maximizes potential and outcomes for each of the individuals. Next slide. Now we can introduce the Life Connect Power Prep. And PREP, as you can see, stands for People Regulating Emotion Purposely. And it is a model that integrates evidence-based and theoretical models that we have listed below. Simply put, we have comprehensive assessment, emotion regulation skills system training in group and individual therapy, peer support services, as we discussed before. Thank you for that lead in there, Bruce. And consultation and psychiatric advocacy. And then the Boom series. And that is a comic book based skills training program that we're currently developing. So that's exciting and in the pipeline.
What did you call that?
Boom series. And
Boom.
right, more to come on that, but it is a skills training program that that's fun and exciting. So
Well, since I love Uncrustables, I think I would like the
yes,
cartoon treatments.
yes, you would like it. And below is a list of the evidence-based and theoretical models that we have integrated into this Power Prep. Julie Brown's emotion regulation skills system is the gold standard now, and definitely receiving more and more evidence base, though she is hesitant to say so. I'm reluctant, but it is, and we're seeing excellent outcomes using that system. And so that is we do the full fidelity emotion regulation skill system groups and training groups for skill system training. That is part of the overall program, and we will describe the rest. That we're using biopsychosocial approach, systems of care model, person-first approach, trauma-informed and positive psychology, peer support recovery-oriented approach, neuropsychiatric cognitive capacity measures, the Cambridge Brain Science, which we'll talk more about, collaborative safety model, and cyberbullying and internet safety. Next slide. Who can benefit from the service? Well, adults and children with an IDD diagnosis who experience behavioral challenges. It's most effective with those in the mild to moderate range of functioning, and with individuals with verbal or manual communication skills. They're more likely to benefit. It's also of benefit to the primary caretakers, the DSPs, and organizations. And we do serve individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing and deaf-blind as well. Next slide.
I just want to clarify that the Life Connect Prep is available in ASL. So it's the exact same model But we have people who can do all the groups, all the skill system training in ASL as well.
So to our assessment process. All individuals referred receive psychiatric and psychological assessment that includes a comprehensive biopsychosocial assessment, medication history, and review of current medications. And then based on need, additional assessment tools are used, and that would almost always includes the PCL5, the GAD-7, PHQ-9, and they're used when the individual can participate. And then the CASI, and that's a service intensity index, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then the Cambridge Brain Science, a battery of tasks measuring cognitive capacity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the assessment process, while everyone receives the comprehensive biopsychosocial assessment and medication history and review of current meds, everything else is very individualized for that person and what's needed. So we do the assessment process in order to gain a complete understanding of where that person is and what their needs are. And
Dr.
next,
Dreyzehner, are you going to get in? Are you going to get into what the PCL5, the GAD-7, and PHQ-9 are at a later point, or could you give us a little?
I wasn't going to. They basically are for they're very standardized tests of for bipolar, mood disorder, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. So those are all three. You know, the GAD-7 is anxiety, and the PHQ-9 is kind of all of those, and depression in particular, and PCL5 for trauma.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and next. All right. So the CASI is what we will. The others are standardized measures that are available and can be used, but we do have to administer them, modifying our language a bit. So that we can get the best results, and so that the individuals can participate with us so we can gain the best information. And so we do have our therapists actually administer those, even though you may be able to see versions that can be self-administered. We have our therapists administer those tests. And so the CASI is the Child and Adolescent Service Intensity Index. And this was a tool created by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And I was fortunate enough to be trained on it by its developers and researchers in 2017. And so in 2018, seeing how helpful it could be in what we were trying to do in assessment for the SOS process, I then began interacting more with the committee and did some presentations for the committee, and began using it in full fidelity when we established Life Connect Health in 2018. And so we had to adapt the language again for persons with IDD. But in general, what this does is it gives a service intensity score that indicates the level of care that's required to meet that person's needs. And it's determined by assessing 6 domains. And these are the domains: risk of harm, functional status, co-occurrence of conditions, and this co-occurrence would include psychiatric conditions, medical conditions, substance use co-occurrence, and developmental conditions. So all 4 of those are measured and assessed for needs within those conditions that make the others, the other domains and the other needs become more, the need is for more specialized services because of them. There's the next one is a recovery environment that is both the environmental stress that's in the environment, and then also the supports that a person has in the environment. And then resiliency and response to services. Resiliency is a person's ability to kind of bounce back after some real challenges. You know, are they able to bounce back to their baseline, or does it string them out for a long time and they need more? And that goes along with the response to services. And then involvement in services. That's both the individual's involvement in services and the caretaker's involvement. And so putting together all of these factors about a person really gives us an in-depth picture of where they have, you know, assets or strengths and gaps in the person's treatment and their environment. And then it guides our treatment planning and recommendations. One of the real benefits of using this instrument is that it really focuses our attention on where the need is greatest. And in addition, we have to have an extremely comprehensive understanding of all these aspects, all of these domains. And in doing so, that gives us a very comprehensive assessment. And that assessment is a minimum of 6 hours in general. It's not done all at one time with, you know, with the person in front of us, but it's done over a period of time, and is a minimum of 6 hours.
One of the really good things about this assessment, Dr. Dreyzehner, is its inclusion of that recovery environment piece, because so often, you know, in the situations we're dealing with, there is a need for not so much for the person to always change as much, but for their living situation to change in a way that it is more supportive and more helpful for them. And so that's really, I think, very, very good that you're using this instrument that includes that measure.
Yeah, that's a great point. And sometimes, as you know, that can be the primary, you know, most critical aspect to address. And so sometimes it does float to the top of what has to be done to help stabilize a person. Most certainly. All right, and the next slide. Okay, and this was the Cambridge Brain Science that I said we would talk a little bit more about. And basically this is a gamified cognitive assessment tool that's accessed by an individual online using a tablet or a computer. And it's a series of tasks. The Cambridge Brain Science Battery was compared in this research study by Levine to a standard 2 to 3 hour paper and pencil neuropsychological battery, and the results were comparable. So that's really exciting, because it's really hard and not really possible to get a 2 to 3 hour paper and pencil neuropsychological battery on some of our individuals. But we can, you know, definitely get the Cambridge Brain Science, and especially because we can break it up and do it over time. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes all at one time. Right, so it can be, you know, most of the tasks or the games are 90 seconds. And so, and we use our peer specialists to do that. We also use the data that we've gathered from other assessments, like the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7 and the mental status exam that we collect alongside these scores to establish a baseline of their cognitive performance. And it helps initially in diagnosis of some disorders, depression, anxiety, ADHD, and others, even autism, have a spectrum of what the scores generally fall into in these different categories and these different domains that are measured. And that's all of those listed below. And So we can use it initially to help with diagnosis, but then we can also use repeat testing to help determine the impact of the treatments that we're using and to help guide any um, intervention adjustments that we need to make. So if something's not working, then it can help guide what we need to do to start using that might be more effective with that individual.
Identify areas that you can help them with this. And so I wonder if, I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but maybe just kind of taking one or two of these, if somebody like say had a difficulty with visual spatial processing or mental rotation, how would that impact their mental health concerns?
Well, and I can give you a good example of what we did with that. So we actually had an individual who had a relative strength in the visual spatial processing. And so he was able to process things visually in space more quickly. And that was one of the things that he was good at and enjoyed. And he actually enjoyed games because of it and video games because of it. And so this individual was able to receive some treatment using an intervention called the Mightier, which is a biofeedback game that where a person wears a heart rate monitor armband and then plays a video game that it's a very specialized video game called the Mightier, that when the person's heart rate goes up, that's the biofeedback part of it, that the game clouds over and makes it where it's hard to move the pieces of the game, and then the game just stops. And then another game, a sub game pops up, and this game is what clouds in is lava, and this second game is called the cool down game. And so the person has to be able to use breathing exercises to calm their heart rate down in order for the lava to solidify into a lavaling, a little character that's collectible. And so then the person is gaining the experience of calming themselves using the biofeedback of the heart rate and using breathing exercises. And so we were able to use this game with an individual who has relative strength in visual spatial processing because he would enjoy doing it and would practice, and he actually gained practice in calming himself with breathing techniques and was able to begin generalizing it in other settings in real life.
So the game is to be able to control your heart rate, essentially, right? I mean, did I understand it correctly? Yeah.
To calm down when you get too agitated or upset, the heart rate goes up as part of it. So if you're frustrated, really, the heart rate goes up, and then the game is to calm it down with breathing. And then once you've calmed down, then and your heart rate's down again, then the original game returns, and you can continue playing. But anytime the heart rate goes up and the frustration level's too high, then the individual has to practice again with a little sub game of calming themselves and cooling down with breathing exercises.
You know, I imagine there are a lot of people thinking, well, how can you control your heart rate? How can you control these, things that are more or less involuntary functions? But there is a voluntary aspect to it, and there are things you can do to decrease that. And so it seems like these games are helping people understand how you can do that, and kind of putting a little bit of a fun challenge with it to make it worthwhile.
Yes, and it also helps us to know what kinds of interventions that we should avoid using because they're likely to really frustrate a person because they don't have that kind of ability And so it's used both ways. We're interested in relative strengths and we're interested in relative weaknesses for the baseline of the cognitive tasks. And then,
But using the strengths as the path to help the person rather
yes,
than focus so much on their weaknesses.
right, right,
An example of that would be, you mentioned a person with ADHD who may not be able to stick with the task very long. And, so when we set out to do something for 15 or 20 minutes with them, it's very likely to go south at some point because the person just can't hang with it that long. And so it looks like you could use any of these areas to move it in a more positive direction for people. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean,
And that
you're
acted a little
exactly
bit at the
right.
Harold George too, and it was, I think we're trying to look at how we could adopt that there as well.
Yeah, the more you do that assessment, you can really inform to make the objective attainable. So just like you mentioned with the attention, how do we set up objectives and goals that are actually attainable and making the person that they're accomplishing something. So even looking at the weaknesses, you can actually turn them into celebration of goals.
Yeah, and the great thing about this is that it really does give you an opportunity to focus on something that's a little bit smaller. Maybe not the thing you typically notice, like about a person's how they process things or whatever, but using those really small details about how somebody interacts with their environment and their all the things around them, and then utilizing that as a way to help them. That is, I think it's brilliant. It's great stuff.
and it's very individualized for each person and how they best learn and how they best interact with others. So I liked that. I think Michelle put that, looking at what's strong instead of what's wrong. I like that. Okay. Next slide. Okay, focus on emotion regulation, and this is the prep part. People regulating emotions purposely. Um, this has been something that Celine and I, noticed right off. It's so important in the prevention of crises, is helping people to be able to manage their emotions themselves without having to, to do it internally themselves without having to depend externally on, staff or restraints or medications or jail, those kinds of things. So we have worked with Dr. Julie Brown. Can't say enough about her and her system. It's brilliant, and we use it with full fidelity. Um, we provide training in the emotion regulation skills system, and which it's a DBT informed emotion regulation skills training curriculum. Consists of 9 core skills and 3 system tools that help people be effective at all levels of emotion. And I know you've had Dr. Brown on before, and we've talked about the skills system, so I won't go into more detail about that other than that we teach it in the context of virtual group therapy. And when we work with an individual, one of our individuals served a person with intellectual or developmental disabilities and their behavioral challenges. When we work with them, it's therapy. It's in the context of therapy, because we have to take into account all of their experiences, and this is where we're integrating all of the responses, all of the models and theoretical models, and especially trauma informed, and we need to individualize that, and sometimes they even require individual therapy along with the group therapy. But our goal is always to move them as quickly as possible into a group therapy setting, because it's really most beneficial to them. And the whole goal of that well, we'll get into it with our phases. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But we also provide the primary caretakers, families or DSPs or their organizations with access to the skill system e-learning so that they can also become effective in helping that individual. It's so important that they can help them practice in their home environment, in real life settings, so that they can learn to apply the skills that they're learning in their life. And that's an important part of progressing. And so let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, Dr. Dreyzehner, in your implementation of this, are the caretakers and families involved in the group work, or is that done separately from the group work?
It's both. And when it's possible, we really try to involve them, especially like the DSPs who are present. That our therapists will work very hard to include them as members of the group, that everybody participates. It can actually take away from the group if there's a DSP or a family member who's monitoring the individual but not participating. And sometimes I've even been present in some groups where it's come up that that's become an issue, that it's actually frustrating the person, and they're going, their emotion level is it's rising, for that 3 to 4 level, because they're so frustrated that they're being watched. So it's
Yeah.
one of those.
So when you involve them, they don't need just to be observers, they need to be participants. And you mentioned the 3 to 4 because Dr. Brown uses a 5-point scale essentially to evaluate where you are in your emotion regulation or your emotional stability. And so when you get to that 3 or 4 level, that's where it's starting to get out of control, whether it's a positive or even what we might consider a positive or a negative emotion. If we're getting into that 4 territory, we're moving to a level where we need to manage things.
Where we're not thinking clearly, and
Yeah, there you go.
having a two-way conversation.
There you go.
Right. That's the difference. So we got to stay at that 3 or below level so that we can think clearly and make good decisions for ourselves. All right. Next. So this is Life Connect Power Prep, our training groups. We have a feelings group, and this is for individuals who are unable to label their emotions or recognize their feelings at the time of assessment. And so it's basically a preparation group for going into the phase 1. Generally, we try to start people at phase 1, but a prerequisite for the program is that they're able to recognize feelings that they're having and label them. And then, so in the feelings group, that's what is worked on until they're able to recognize emotions.
And just to tap on that, Dr. D, in the feelings group, we're mostly utilizing social stories as a basis to learn feelings. So, identifying positive feelings, negative feelings, and putting names on it. And it's actually a really fun group.
It's very fun.
It's very fun.
And the members enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then when they are able to successfully, label, recognize and label those emotions, then they are moved to a phase 1 group. And we call each time they're leveling up a group, that's a reason to celebrate. And they get certificates, and we make a deal of that because we're celebrating each step of the way. In phase 1, it's basically where the individuals learn skills 1 through 9 of the skills system and the 3 system tools, and then they know the purpose of each skill and each system tool, and so they know why they would use it, how it would help them. They might not be able to use it yet. They might not be able to put it into practice, but they know it. And that is then the prerequisite for leveling up to phase 2. And phase 2 is for where they begin to actually practice applying the knowledge of the skills. And so they learn to skills coach themselves and each other. And a big part of it initially is learning to accept skills coaching from others, um, and why they would want to do that. Because if it's not approached in the right way, an individual can get very turned off by somebody kind of forcing it on them. So that's why it's done in a therapeutic group setting, so that each individual really does have choice. And the phase 2 part of the training groups is the longest phase. And it can, whereas phase 1 is typically about 3 months. Sometimes it takes an individual a little bit longer. Sometimes we have people who just get it right away and need to move up sooner. So, I mean, it really varies, but I would say probably an average of about 3 months for phase 1, whereas phase 2 is really, we've learned a lot in our 3 years of doing this, and phase 2 can vary from, I think we said a minimum of 9 months, but it's generally 1 to 2 years in phase 2. This is a big thing to learn to put into practice, and people vary in their ability to do it, but they also get very attached to the peers who are in their group with them, and they gain trust in interacting with those people, and so they're very encouraging to each other, and so when they're ready to go to phase 3 is when they've been basically able to skills coach themselves effectively. And phase 3 is really more of a maintenance phase that it's used to increase their confidence and their ability to continue to do this on their own. And it doesn't mean that, when they're doing it independently, that it means that they're never going to get help with it again. What they have to learn is how do they ask for and get it right, get what they need from their environment. How do they get to really allow for coaching from their supports that are around them. So that's an important part. And then and that they meet twice monthly, whereas phase 2 meets twice a week, for basically hour to hour and a half sessions, depending on the group. And the phase 3 is twice monthly. And then at that point, when they're able to demonstrate that they can skills coach themselves or get what they need from their environment, that's graduation. Okay.
Yeah, that's great to get to that point. It seems like a lot of times what we do in working with people who have difficulty with emotion regulation, probably people who have a trauma history of some kind that's contributing to that we end up bouncing from crisis to crisis and not getting back to what can we do to help the person. And part of the reason is because it takes a little while for this to take hold, as you just pointed out. And, you can't think you're going to be able to resolve concerns like that overnight. It really is I think a lot of us probably don't realize how important the skill of emotion regulation is, because we don't experience emotions at the same level that a lot of the people that are having difficulty with this are. And that's I think it's an important part of empathy and perspective understanding in this that we need to have, that you brought to us with this timeline that you've laid out.
And these are the kind of the timelines for the individuals. And like we said, we make the e-learning available for their circle of support, basically. And so it's a very different kind of process to go through the e-learning in a 3-hour time frame and know the skills system versus really being able to walk it and talk it in life. And
Right.
What people who are going to be most successful and get to phase 3 have is the support in their environment of people who are willing to walk it and talk it with them.
I mean, a very concrete example that we had an individual who was in a mental health institute, and her social worker attended all the groups with her and really actively participated. And on her own came up with all the strategy in the environment of a mental health institute to put posters, to have laminated handouts where they could support that individual with rating and labeling feelings and doing the steps of clear pictures. So where that individual by herself, not having that support and mental, probably would have never acquired any of those skills. So it's the ideal scenario when the supports are involved, because they'll understand ways how to help the individual generalize those skills, and that works for their environment. So.
Okay.
We had a question in chat if this would be suitable for someone with autism spectrum disorder who's highly intelligent but still has some significant behavior issues.
Absolutely, they're the perfect candidate. And that's what we do. Our individuals, regularly have behavioral challenges, and that's what they bring to their group, and that's what they practice being coached on, and coaching each other. So that's all a part of it. And I know we're running short on time, so I guess we need to move on. I can move quickly through the next 2 because we've talked about it a little bit. So we have a peer support specialist who interacts with each member prior to the group, and provides reminders, encouragement, technical support when needed. Our peer support specialist is present in the initial assessments. So he's somebody who the members see on a regular basis and know throughout. So very important. We celebrate the milestones.
And he participates in all the groups, every single one.
And
so
all the groups.
He's learning with, participating in the coaching, role modeling, role playing, all of that.
So he's a very important person on our team. And we celebrate milestones. We have monthly pizza parties to celebrate participation, where we send pizza to each person in their home, and they have it during group time together. And we have certificates of completion for each phase of the program, and a graduation gift and recognition with the circle of support at graduation. Telephonic access to the peer for skills coaching in between sessions, so they know how to reach him if they need anything in between sessions. And the DSPs and caretakers involvement, this is what we were talking about, and their enthusiasm are the most powerful tools for engagement and encouragement both. That's what we see successful. And then
finally each other's, the individuals in group, what we found is that they're having interactions, true social interaction, and they're learning how to care about each other very much. So the number of volunteers, if somebody reports feeling out of 3 out of 4, they'll have an entire group of friends who's ready to skills coach them and say, do you need to be walked through, or I'm sorry if you feel that way. So it's actually very interesting how that social interaction, that connection to each other, is a huge engagement strategy, because not only do they want to see Felix, they want to see their therapist, but they want to see their peers. So.
Yeah. Is that any different when you're doing it via telehealth? I mean, so, or maybe what I'm asking, are there any specific things we need to be aware of that cause it to be more effective when you're using telehealth? I mean, so I was just thinking about when I go to a conference, one of the things I like about going to a conference is networking and talking to other people while I'm there. And with a lot of the conferences that we've had lately, that's been a little bit more challenging because we're doing them online. And I just didn't know if you guys had any thoughts about how you make that a meaningful interaction through telehealth and especially between the peers.
It's actually, you can add after this, Celine, but it's actually more effective by telehealth than in person in our experience, because we have had some in-person groups prior to establishing the Life Connect Power Prep. And we had to deal with one individual who was escalated, triggering other individuals. And it was much more difficult in person to keep the tone of the room focused on learning and positivity, because one person could, sabotage that or undermine that in person. It doesn't happen by telehealth, and everybody knows that they're warned. They can be muted, one, or two, removed from the group. And it's only happened, on very rare occasions, and then our peer follows up with them immediately. But that's an option that doesn't exist, in person. And also the turn taking and the ability for a person to be facing forward and looking at a screen of people, just as we are now. You can actually see more people at the same time than you could if you were sitting in a circle and changing your field of vision, and you can't see everybody at the same time. So there's a few things like that that actually make the telehealth platform better.
And and from a logistics standpoint, I mean, having ran residential program, transportation to appointments can cause a lot of chaos and stress for the individual. Somebody else could have an emergency and you're not making it to your appointment, so that person is distressed, or you're riding with somebody in a vehicle that's escalating you. So just having that transportation factor removed, I think they're entering in, kind of a calmer stage. Uh, and they love being in the environment so they can show things that are relevant to them too. So
True.
the number of times where somebody like, oh, what is that in your background? What is that, a picture? And so there's always, a few minutes of group that are spent where somebody's showing the latest drawing that they've made, or that stuffed animal that they really care about. So that creates some opportunity for connection. So the fact that they don't have to live their environment is pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's an advantage I hadn't thought about. That although you can get more sensitized to the person's living arrangement and living, the way their apartment's designed or their house is designed, and so forth. That's a subject of conversation, rapport building, everything that you need there to make it successful. So.
And
That's
also
great.
who their supports are, and what those relationships look like. And if they're,
Yeah.
being frustrated during the group, I mean, we've seen some things that have been incredibly inappropriate, on the basis of the supporters' part, and that we might not have understood that was really an issue, if we were just hearing it from the individual. So.
Yeah. Well, those are some great advantages that probably a lot of people hadn't thought of.
Well, since we're just about out of time here, Celine, do you want to just jump in here, how to make a referral?
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy. It can be done online. Currently, we're only accepting individuals who are ECF members with eligible for specialized consultation and training, or individuals who have Medicaid and are members of a MARE group and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. So if those individuals have that coverage, the referral can be made. You can go to the next slide. It's www.lifeconnecthealth.com. There's a tab that says make a referral. and then you would just enter the information. It will ask for uploads of medication, a current MAR, and a PCSP or an ISP minimally, or a behavior support plan. But of course, any information that you have prior, psychological assessment,
The
anything
next slide.
would be helpful. So you just can upload it. You can also have the member or their conservator sign the consent for treatment directly online. Everything's done through secure transmission, so it's HIPAA compliant, and it takes about 30 seconds, which makes that process a little easier. So no need to scan, fax, or mail things. So yeah, that's the referral. Did you want to just have a couple of minutes for, are there any questions or?
Yeah, if we have any questions.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Joan Jenkins. This is a phenomenal program. And my question is, what is the age range for referrals?
I mean,
Yeah.
children and adults are both, eligible for the program. So that's the scope. I mean, obviously, when some level of communication has been established from an age perspective, but yeah, we do have services for children as well.
Okay, so someone can actually go on your website if they're interested in the program, and they can refer themselves if they'd like to, or a family member can make a referral. Is that correct?
Correct. If they have the correct coverage at this time, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So, 10 Care Select members are, for children that we're able to serve 10 Care Select members.
Are you both okay with me sharing that PowerPoint out to the group? I've had a question come in privately for that.
Sure.
Yes, that's fine.
That's great. Hey, listen, really appreciate you guys coming in today and talking to us about this. I hope that a lot of people are going to make referrals to you, because you're important partners in everything that we're trying to accomplish in the state of Tennessee with our assessment stabilization teams. You're an augment to that. You're one of the resources that we have that's out there available. So I'm so glad you are available, and I really want to encourage people that they should refer people to your service. It's a very important thing for people to be learning. I also want to make mention of the fact that the TNAD conference is coming up this Thursday. It's online this year. I encourage you to go to the TNAD website, tn-nadd.org, I believe it is. It's either .org or .com. I think either one will take it.
.org.
But in any case, I want to encourage you to go to that conference and learn even more about some of these different things that we talk about on the Clinical Consultation Network, which of course we do every Tuesday at 12:30. And I want to encourage you to always be here for this as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Dreyzehner, Celine.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And we'll see you next week.